tuned in to The Andrew Lawton Show.
We are going to pivot from CBC to BC here because you may have caught this announcement last week from the RCMP that they had seized large quantities of drugs, which, I mean, it's BC, Kelsaprise, but 10,000 prescription drugs that had been originally distributed through government safe supply programs, so-called safe supply programs, and we can get to that shortly. But these drugs were put out through this channel, and then they were diverted and end up in the hands of organized crime, which are, of course, selling these opioids for profit. Now, following this, we have the Premier of British Columbia and the Attorney General and Solicitor General of BC saying, oh, we've never really seen evidence of too much diversion. It's all just no big deal here. That was effectively Premier David Eby's point on this. But diversion has been something that critics of these so-called safe supply programs have been sounding the alarm about for quite some time. One of these is journalist Adam Zivo from the National Post, who joins us once again. Adam, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming back on.
Thanks for having me back on the show.
So how does diversion work, first and foremost? Because I know this is something that people that have, blissfully not been in this world might not realize or understand.
Well, so Safer Supply is a program where we give out free pharmaceutical opioids and stimulants as a way to dissuade people from using the illicit street supply. So, for example, if you're addicted to fentanyl, you don't know what's in it. It could be contaminated with benzodiazepines or xylazine. The dosage is unpredictable, so you could easily take too much, which causes you to overdose and die. So the concept behind Safer Supply is that if we give you government-funded drugs, that you'll know what you're getting, and therefore you'll stay alive until you can seek treatment. And that sounds great in theory, but in practice, a significant portion of those drugs are actually sold on the street so that drug users can make money to buy stronger illicit substances, which means that not only are we not mitigating the substances in that market, we're actually subsidizing it and flooding these diverted drugs.
So is this a case of drug users, people that are on these drugs getting them and basically wanting to do what that like one red paperclip guy did years ago of like trading them up for something else? Or is it people that are, for whatever reason, not drug users that are being co-opted or paid to go into these programs and pose as drug users? Or is it a bit of both?
It's a combination of both. So the vast majority of it are people who are actually addicted to fentanyl. And we give out something called hydromorphone, which is the strongest heroin. But fentanyl is 10 to 50 times stronger than heroin and hydromorphone. So if you're a fentanyl user, the hydromorphone is not going to do anything for you. So you're going to go and sell your hydromorphone to get money to buy fentanyl. So those people are actually addicts. Then there's a smaller population of people who may have drug issues, but it's not as severe. And for them, they are often coerced these are vulnerable women who are coerced by abusive partners or spouses who push them to get as much Safer Supply as possible to sell for money. So it's a combination.
And I mean, when you look at organized crime, which is what the police allegations here are being involved in it wouldn't be difficult to imagine criminal organizations that are running these vast networks. I mean, in many cases, this is in BC, but these could be spanning the entire country. And it seems to be really unbelievable for the province to come out and say, well, we've not really seen any evidence of this, when police have literally made that claim days earlier.
Well, here's the thing. I've been hearing about organized crime's involvement in this market for about a year now. I heard it when I was doing my initial report based on interviews with 14 addiction physicians, and that report came out in May. Then I interviewed another addiction physician who prescribed Safer Supply in Victoria, and she said, yeah, we're aware of the fact that organized crime is involved here too. Then last July, I interviewed former drug users in London, Ontario, and one of them said, yeah, he just got out of jail. He knows that organized crime is involved because his associates are in organized crime and they traffic Safer Supply. And then last October, I went and basically did an investigation on Safer Supply trafficking on Reddit and found dozens of examples of thousands of pills being sold online, originating from Safer Supply, validated with Safer Supply prescriptions. And it's obvious that if you're trafficking to that degree, that there's an element of organization there. And then on top of that, I even interviewed one drug dealer who I was able to locate through this investigation, who confirmed like how this all works. He mentioned that you would have criminals put together teams of, let's say, 5 or 6 Safer Supply clients, and then that criminal would go and buy up all of their supply, get like 1,000 pills in a week, and then ship it all over Canada. So we know this is happening. And then in January, or rather early February, the BC government came out with a report based on extensive interviews with clinicians and drug users across the province, and they concluded that diversion was a common occurrence. And then last week, the RCMP at the lower level did two big drug busts where they found thousands of safer supply pills that had been sold. And these frontline police officers are saying that organized crime is involved. But now that there's political pressure here, all of a sudden the top level of the RCMP is spreading this new narrative, which is completely at odds with all the other information that we have out there, which to me would raise concerns about the politicization of the leadership of the RCMP.
Yeah, and I've been obviously, I think, giving a fair bit of deserved criticism to the BC government here, but the federal government is not immune from this at all. And I know you've written about this, where activists or experts rather in this space have brought their concerns directly to the federal government, and basically they've fallen on deaf ears.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, right now the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions is Yara Sachs. She is not competent to be in her position. She just comes from a background where she was a yoga teacher, and then she was the head of some mental health nonprofit. I mean, we got a yoga teacher in charge, and we've got a former drama teacher in charge. Maybe not the best team to be handling a high-stakes initiative like this. And a team of 17 addiction physicians, many of whom are highly respected in their field, tried to write a public letter to Yara and said, we have concerns. We are seeing mass diversion in our practices. We are seeing people relapse because of safer supply in our practices. We have some very moderate recommendations on how you can reform this program so you can keep it in some aspect, but make it much more responsible and much less harmful to surrounding communities. And she ignored them. And after she ignored them, they found more signatories. So there was now another open letter with 35 signatories, came out, I believe, in late October, early November. And she ignored that too. So then they sent a third letter, and then she finally responded. She gave them 30 minutes of her time in January, which is nothing. And she changed the timing right beforehand, which suggests that that they weren't really valuable. And they gave her a presentation that was very firmly based in evidence. These highly experienced addiction physicians. And I reviewed the slides that they showed to the minister. It was all solid material. It was all thoughtful. None of it was alarmist. All of it was based on evidence and strong reasoning. And she never responded. And then a few weeks later, told the Canadian press that criticism of safer supply is unfounded and based in fear and stigma. And so she's essentially arguing that these addiction physicians who went into this field to help people who are struggling with addiction now have some giant fear and stigma directed towards their clients, which doesn't make any sense at all.
One of the things that I wanted to raise on this is that obviously if you do have organized crime co-opting this system, as you've certainly laid out the case for, we're going to see more people using this than would otherwise be eligible or drawn to it. And the problem is that the people that are all in on this see increases in usage as being a positive, because they say, oh, well, great, more people are using this program. That's what we want. So there isn't really an incentive for them to face the fact that it's not working, and face the fact that even if you believe in the core essence of what safe supply is supposed to be, which is dubious, the diversion problem isn't really being caught by them.
Well, for them, many of these people think that diversion is totally fine because they want to flood the market with quote unquote safe.
Because organized crime is selling the safe government approved drugs. Is that the argument?
Because they say, look, if people buy these diverted pharmaceutical drugs, at least it's not something that was made in someone's bathtub, and therefore it's safer for them to use. The fact that when you add more supply to the market, that cheapens prices and that leads to more overall usage. And you can't just expect to replace the entire illicit supply with pharmaceutical opioids. That's not going to work. That's not what we're seeing in practice today. What happens is that the people who are using the street fentanyl, car fentanyl, they just continue using that. They don't want the pharmaceutical opioids that we're giving to them. So this idea that we're keeping people safe is really naive. And then on top of that, the entire reason that we have an opioid crisis to begin with in North America is because we're doing exactly what these harm reduction activists want. We did that, 20 years ago. So you had this, the OxyContin scandal, where you had this predatory pharmaceutical company called Purdue Pharma that essentially lied to people about how dangerous pharmaceutical opioids are, said it was safe, said it was fine, and then flooded communities with safe pharmaceutical opioids. And that got everyone addicted and then created the crisis that we see today. So now, for some reason, even though 20 years ago to 10 years ago, like this isn't 100 years ago, this is very recent, we saw how damaging it is. Some people are saying, ridiculously, that flooding communities with pharmaceutical opioids is somehow a good thing.
Wow. Well, very, very well put, and good work on this, Adam Zivo from the National Post. And I should also plug, you are the founder and director of the Center for Responsible Drug Policy. What's that about?
It's a new organization that I started, launched about a month ago, that is focused, as the name suggests, on pushing Canada towards more responsible drug policies that rein back some of the excesses that we've seen in recent years. But at the same time, we are cognizant of the fact that the war on drugs rhetoric that we saw in the 80s and 90s doesn't work either. So we're basically trying to chart a middle path that doesn't just rely on incarcerating drug users, that is actually empathetic to their needs and focuses on addressing why people do drugs and investing into mental health and housing. But at the same time, saying that maybe it's not a good idea to give everyone free drugs to destroy themselves, and maybe it's not a good idea to decriminalize drugs without investing into treatment and recovery.
Very, very well put on that point as well. Adam, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.